Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special committee meeting. I want to acknowledge that we are in the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, in particular the Qualicum First Nation, and I'm asking Council anything to be added to the agenda. Then the agenda is adopted by consent. We have a Qualicum Beach Airport third quarter report. Mr. Kevin, I forgot your last name. Goldfuss, sorry. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, I'm pleased to be able to present tonight the third quarter report for the Qualicum Beach Airport. We will be providing a brief overview of this report, and then we have a slide presentation that we will be presenting as well. So thank you. So it's been a busy year. So the Airport Authority has been managing several projects over the year, this third quarter, which includes, but is not limited to, preparing for airport improvements, improving the inquiry tracking system, and researching and developing the FlyCat 4 Good Neighbor program, and training as well. So training is very important, and it's actually a requirement under Transport Canada regulations. So September the 18th of this year, we conducted our annual training exercise, and it involved bringing in a fuselage, an old fuselage, and there was 3 different scenarios, Your Worship, that were set up. It went throughout the whole day, and the Qualicum Beach Fire Department, the RCMP, BC Ambulance, and our Public Works staff attend these training sessions. It was a very successful event, and but ironically, Your Worship, on 2 days prior to that training event, on September the 16th, we actually had an aircraft event where we had an aircraft landing at the Qualicum Beach Airport, and there was landing gear failure. So it was a bad experience, but a good experience. And the reason why I say it was a good experience, Your Worship, was what it demonstrated was that our training, the training that we do annually, it really paid dividends. And where it paid dividends was the Qualicum Beach Fire and Rescue were there immediately, the RCMP, BC Ambulance, our public works staff, and actually they weren't on scene, but Transport Canada and the Transportation Safety Board were also involved. So yeah, it was, like I say, it was not a good thing, but it also was something that was a good experience to observe. Okay? So some of the airport improvements that we're going to be moving forward on. This year, we completed the aviation fuel system. That's a 30,000-liter avgas system. It's a reliable system. It's a safe system. It has a life expectancy of 30 to 50 years, so that was completed this year. We also, Your Worship, we put in a couple of grant applications under the ACAP program. And I think it's important to note with the ACAP program, it's a federally regulated program. And it was actually put into place in 1995 when Transport Canada got out of the airport business. So what they did to recognize and take some of the burden, if you will, off of the taxpayers for operating airports, they created an ACAP, Airport Assistance Capital Program. And in doing that, I think they have annually approximately $30 million across Canada that they provide to airports, more specifically smaller airports such as Qualicum Beach. And there's a criteria for funding. So for an example, when we put in an ACAP application for Qualicum Beach Airport, we are 100% eligible. And the threshold for that is commercial. You have to have a commercial air carrier or you don't qualify. But the threshold for 100% funding is between 1,000 and 50,000 passenger movements, per year. And so, and the way it works on a sliding scale, so to speak, so for an example, Vancouver Airport, YVR, they wouldn't be eligible at all. And for good reason, because they're self-funded in many ways. So we put in 2 applications, one for $3.5 million for next year for a runway overlay, which would include our taxiways and our apron. And we put in another grant application for the replacement of some of our equipment, which includes a new loader, snow blower, and some attachments. So, and with that, we should be notified, I believe, in April of 2025. So. Some of the other initiatives that we've been working on, of course, the airport inquiry tracking system. This tracking system was developed a little over a year ago. We've now gone through a full year in 2024, and I can tell Council that it is proving to be a real benefit to the airport and the community. It's just not only for the airport, I should mention. People can inquire about other things, whether it be throughout the community, whatever it may be. But more specifically with the airport, what it's demonstrating to us is it's allowing us to create data. And that data is really important when we look at what type of inquiries are we getting. So does a complaint come through, or is it something else? What it does with that data is it allows us to identify, for an example, where is it coming from, okay? What type of complaint it is. Is it a violation? Is it a noise complaint? Whatever it may be. And with that data, what we do is we look at it, we create charts, we're able to know where, and we'll call them hot spots, where those hot spots may be. So maybe a specific residential neighborhood or an area that we weren't aware of. And what it provides is it provides a conversation, if you will, to start looking at solutions, okay? And the Good Neighbor program is a prime example of that, one of those solutions, right? And so it's turning out to be a really valuable tool. And we encourage the public to use that tool because it allows us, again, to, look at the data and respond and take action if required. So with that, from June the 16th to November the 15th, and November the 15th, I just want to add that was our cutoff for this reporting time. So from the 16th of June to November the 15th, we've received 116 inputs, which are inquiries, okay? And that came from 40 addresses throughout the community, okay? Out of that, there were 7 violations, okay, which we call actionable, okay? So we took action on those violations, 5 of which were noise complaints. More specifically, they were noise abatement procedure violations, 5 of them, and 2 of those were curfew violations. And what we found with the curfew violations, for an example, because the curfew is actually published in the CFS, which is the Canadian Flight Supplement, okay? But what we found was it was a misunderstanding with pilots, but nonetheless, it's still their responsibility. But what we found, there was a misunderstanding in the time change, okay? And they thought the time change went with the curfew, right? So when the time changed, they thought they were good till 11 o'clock, but they're really not, because it's in Zulu time and there's an asterisk there, and that doesn't change. So it's 10 o'clock, 12 months of the year, right? It doesn't flow with the time change. So that was interesting. That was interesting. So what we do with those violations is, as your APM, I write a letter and we send it off, and that's actionable, what we call actionable. And what we find, we don't get a response, but what we're finding is we don't get a reoccurrence either. So what we do is we look for the registered owner of that aircraft, and that letter is addressed to the registered owner of the aircraft. So, and we're looking at it as a real positive outcome. So when we look at the total year, from January to November, we've received 221 inputs from 52 separate addresses, okay? So for the total year, Your Worship, we've had 12 violations, which are 12 actionable items. So to date for the year, we've had 7 noise abatement procedures that were violations, and again, letters were sent out. We had 7 of those and 5 curfew violations, okay, for the year. The Good Neighbor program, as we know, that's been up and running for quite some time with positive results. We've had positive feedback, not only from community members, but from our stakeholders as well. We advertise that. We have now a 50-inch television screen up in the lobby. That gives us an opportunity to post that on there. It's well received. In addition to that, we have handouts. I go often and speak with stakeholders such as the flight school, the flying club. I meet with them on a regular basis, and often what comes up is these conversations on, you know, Good Neighbor and how can we improve things. So successful. Medevacs this year, this airport is very strategically located in terms of where it is on Vancouver Island on the East Coast. We know we have the best weather in Canada, for an example. So from an aeronautics point of view, it's very strategically located within this region, and with that said, it's a vital, important resource when it comes to medevacs. So this year, we've had 5 medevacs that have come in and out. Most of them are rotary wing, but there is fixed wing. So for an example, Ascent Helicopters, I think we all know, has been awarded the provincial contract. They're primarily, and they are specifically rotor wing helicopters, but Carson Air has the fixed wing contract for the province as well. So sometimes we see Carson Air come in and Ascent as well. What's interesting though, and I just want to add this, is that we don't get any inquiries when medevacs come in, okay? And I thought I'd make a point of that, because most of the time medevacs are coming into this community in the middle of the evening or the middle of the night when everybody's sleeping. Since I've been here in the 2 years, I have not received one inquiry or one complaint of that helicopter traffic or air traffic coming in and out of Qualicum Beach. So I just want to note that. But it is very vital to this community. I personally know of someone that has had to use that. Last 2 weeks ago, for an example, I can share that I had a call from BC Ambulance Services. They were filing a flight plan for a helicopter out of Port McNeill. They needed to know from me if Jet A fuel was available, because that helicopter had to land in Qualicum Beach before it could continue on to Victoria with the patient, and we were able to provide that service. I waited for the helicopter, ensured that everything was seamless. The helicopter landed, took on fuel, and proceeded to Victoria with the patient, which, when you think about it, Your Worship, is a really huge benefit, like I say, for this community to have such a service so close by, because we often talk about that golden hour. Helicopter training. This year we approved 12 requests for helicopter training, and that was a total of 63.1 hours for the 12 months, or up to, like I say, November the 15th. And primarily that helicopter training, Your Worship, is for night vision. They do a lot of that now, so that when a scent comes into a scene, like a motor vehicle accident out on our highways, which they often do in the shadows of darkness, those pilots are wearing special gear so that they can come in night vision, because there's no lights or anything. In fact, they ask the emergency services to turn off their lights, because it's a conflict with their technology in night vision. So they trained for that. We had BC Forest Service training for wildfire activity. We've had BC Hydro training for long line and stuff like that. A lot of these companies are contracted, of course, with BC Hydro. So in the event of power outages like we experienced in the bomb cyclone, those crews have to often get up, and they're suspended by these lines to fix these high tension lines. So this is what they train for, and this is what they're utilizing our airport at Qualicum Beach for. So I think with that, we have prepared a slide for everyone tonight, and so with your permission, Your Worship, I would like to hand this portion of the slide over to Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Mr. Goldfuss. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. Would Council like to pause and receive that report that the airport manager, or would you like to come back to that?
We can move the report for information, and then after your presentation, we can invite the public for their input or questions. So if I could have a motion to receive the quarterly report as presented by Mr. Goldfuss. Councillor Vanderwall, Councillor Skipsey, discussion. All in favor? Motion carried. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the airport manager and myself will co-present. I'll take the first few slides. The airport manager will then take the middle chunk, and then we'll come back to me. So some of it will be repetitive, given the report that you just received, so I hope you'll bear with us. So a big thank you to everyone for being here tonight. Staff did take some effort in making sure this was well publicized. Constant Contact, Facebook, the town webpage, town tidings, posters. We also emailed all of our employees. So I think from the turnout tonight, I think the reach out was a success. So again, thank you to everyone for being here. So 2024 has been a busy year, as the airport manager spoke to. We have the fueling station in, we have the Good Neighbor program implemented. We've seen success both with receiving grants and making applications for the ACAP funding. We did do the training as referenced. We've also done some investigation, or coordinated, if you will, with BC Hydro for investigation into the possibility of three-phase power at the airport. We do see that inquiry tracking system being well used, which again, I can't emphasize the value of the data enough. I think another big success in 2024 is actually shifting to this robust quarterly reporting that Council is now receiving. So probably a year ago, you weren't receiving this level of reporting from the airport. So I think that's a really positive step forward. We also saw multiple directions coming out of the Committee of the Whole, this through strategic planning for future undertakings, and we touch on those in a later slide. The airport manager also talked about the 2024 stats, so the inquiry tracking system, helicopter training stats, and air ambulance stats. There has been discussion about funding. My director of finance made this slide because it's scrolling in for me here. He does the fancy slides. We are talking about costing for multiple facilities because it came up through strategic planning about what the airport costs the taxpayer. And I think in one of the last meetings I had talked about the fact that a local government has multiple bottom lines. We don't approach things as a purely business approach. We have multiple bottom lines to consider. I think the way that we also fund things may be a little different as well. So when we talk about Town Hall, the airport, and the Civic Center, these are what these facilities cost the taxpayer. So these include operating costs, direct wages, office supplies, contracted services, utilities. There's a share of contribution to the asset management reserve. So we fund our capital projects through a process that the Director of Finance is happy to speak to. And this excludes grant-funded projects because, again, we're trying to keep things apples to apples. So here is a breakdown of the, I don't think there's one more, is there, Raj? One more line. The operating revenue from the airport is $126,300. We see a profit on fuel, $27,100. We have operating expenses, and we have the capital contribution to the reserve. And so we see a net taxpayer cost of $304,100 to the airport. And again, that's very much in line with what we're seeing for other facilities. So there was reference to what the airport costs people per day. And so the Director of Finance did the calculation because this had been discussed in the previous meeting. And we actually see per taxable property, the airport costing 17 cents a day, just over $5 monthly, and annually $60, just about $61. So a little background for the airport. We know it was constructed in 1954. It is open 7 days per week, and it's closed between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. unless we have an emergency flight, as was previously mentioned. The airport does allow training opportunities for fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft. And this is really training that isn't necessarily about new pilots. A lot of the training we see is Transport Canada required training. At this point, with your permission, Your Worship, I'll pass it back to the airport manager who can walk through the more technical pieces of the Good Neighbor program, the noise abatement program, and other associated items. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell and Ms. Goldhurst.
Thank you, Your Worship. So noise mitigation at the Qualicum Beach Airport must be approached as a collaborative effort between the airport, pilots, airport users, and the community, which seeks to adopt a noise-friendly minimum disturbance culture. The FlyCat for Good Neighbor program was endorsed by the Qualicum Beach Airport Users Committee. Ways to minimize noise disturbances for the surrounding community and creating awareness for pilots is top of mind. So the FlyCat for Good Neighbor program provides a mechanism for the airport authority to present information to pilots on noise mitigation procedures. What this chart shows is the airport authority. Matters of noise mitigation from an operational perspective will be discussed as required at the Airport Users Committee, which is a technical advisory committee, meeting with commercial helicopter operators, fixed wing operators, and the scheduled commercial carrier. The FlyCat for Good Neighbor program recommends and encourages pilots to support and conform to a set of best operational flight procedures, which help to minimize noise disturbances within the surrounding communities. The goal is to increase pilots' awareness and understanding of helpful noise mitigations. So what you see here is you see a circuit, if you will, of turns to the south. So runway 11 recommended on departure, track extended runway, center line, then when safe to do so, turn south using best rate of climb before proceeding on course. And the same for runway 29, recommend on departure, track extended runway, center line, until the railway tracks, then when safe to do so, turn south, using best rate of climb before proceeding on course. During departures and arrivals, follow safe procedures to minimize noise impacts over populated areas. On departure, use best rates of climb. On arrival, use minimum power settings commensurate with safety. Comply with all applicable Transport Canada regulations, procedures, and Canadian Flight Supplement restrictions, procedures, and requirements. These recommendations are intended to minimize noise disturbances within the surrounding communities. The signs are located at both our fuel stations and on the runway hold lines. This is our noise abatement procedure, Your Worship. Noise abatement procedures from either runway, track extended runway center lines, no turns north below 1,000 feet above sea level within 2 nautical miles of runway, and no altitude restrictions on turns to the south. So what that means is this is a regulation. And this is really important because a noise abatement procedure under Transport Canada is a regulation, okay? A regulation is enforceable. At our airport, the Qualicum Beach Airport, there are no regulations on turns to the south. So that's why we use the terminology when safe to do so. The NAP, Noise Abatement Procedures, applies to all aircraft operating under visual flight rules during weather conditions of 2 or more miles of visibility. Arriving aircraft must be established on or south of the extended runway center line when within 2 nautical miles of the runway threshold. Departing aircraft must fly the extended runway center line. No turns north are permitted until at 1,000 feet above sea level, which is 800 feet above ground, or 2 nautical miles from the end of the runway. And again, there are no restrictions on turns to the south. This is the procedure, and this is pursuant to the Canadian Aviation Regulations 602.105, procedures. This is published, of course, and it talks about right-hand turn circuits. It talks about for instrument flight rules, clearing what's required by pilots. Night restrictions apply between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. No flights except for medevac or with airport manager's prior approval are permitted, and night operations are prohibited if the approach lighting system precision approach path indicator is not operating. This is a noise-sensitive area. So this talks about noise-sensitive areas. So at the Qualicum Beach Airport, and this is important because this map has been in place for a number of years. Typically what happens around airports is these are created, for an example, when subdivisions may be created, okay? And through the planning process, when subdivisions happen, you know, it gets created. So I think what's important to note with a noise-sensitive area is it's not a requirement and it's not a regulation. So what that means is it's not a requirement and or a regulation of Transport Canada and or NAV Canada, okay? It's kind of a nice to have, okay? But this is what Qualicum Beach has, and it's a good thing we do have this. So what it says is avoid overflight of noise-sensitive areas at altitudes of less than 1,000 feet above ground level. And you can see by the sketch. So if you look to the north, that would include Chartwell, Eagle Crest area, and then to the northeast or more to the east, if you will, It shows the farm area and some of the regional district. And then when you look to the south, it would include portions of Lee Road, Rupert Road area, for an example. So, and again, note, noise-sensitive areas are published in the CFS. They are separate and apart from the noise abatement procedure. So it's important as well to understand that, Your Worship, that a noise abatement procedure is completely different than a noise-sensitive area. One being that noise-sensitive areas are, again, are not a requirement and they're not a regulation, but a noise abatement procedure is a regulation. And with a regulation, it is enforceable. Thank you. Helicopters. Turbine-equipped helicopters are prohibited from flying continuous circuits unless prior approval is obtained from the APM, the airport manager. All helicopters are prohibited from arriving or departing over the noise-sensitive areas, and again, refer to the sketch, below 1,000 feet above ground. Noise concerns and queries can be reported on the town's website using the public information form, inquiry form. For complaints related to the noise abatement procedure, airport staff will evaluate, investigate, respond to queries in a timely and efficient manner. The airport will continue to inform and communicate with the community and airport users and operators on an ongoing basis, and see stats. So we will show you some stats later in this presentation. I would like to, I think this is the end of the presentation on the Good Neighbor program, but I'd like to provide, if I may, Your Worship, just a little bit of history of how this came to be. So the Airport Authority and Council, we were approached earlier this year actually by a community member. And I think this is really important to note, Your Worship. And the community member provided us with a Good Neighbor program from the Pitt Meadows Airport, okay? So we looked at that and we found it very interesting, okay? So what we did with that Pitt Meadows Good Neighbor program is we tailored it. We tailored it to the town of Qualicum Beach and the Qualicum Beach Airport. And by doing that, what we did was we presented it to council. It was endorsed by council. And from there, we took it to the AUC, the Airport Users Committee. We took it to our stakeholders, the Flying Club, the flight school, and what have you. And Your Worship, it was 100% endorsed, okay? And what I can tell you, Your Worship, is it's become a very successful program. And the reason why I say it's become a successful program is, again, what we're observing is we're observing a difference, if you will, if that's the right terminology, but we're observing a difference in pilots and pilot behavior. And it's not that pilot behavior, and by no means am I implying that pilot behavior is wrong. All I'm saying when I say that, Your Worship, is through education, like anything, we all learn, and maybe there's a different way or a better way to be doing things. So I just bring that up because also what I'm also trying to say is that council and staff are listening to the community. And this is a good example of that. When the community member brought this forward, we took it, we grasped it, we changed it, we developed it, and it's turned out, like I say, to be a very successful program for the Qualicum Beach Airport. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of history. So the fueling system, it was completed in April. Provides a safe and reliable fuel dispensary with a life expectancy, like I say, of 30 to 50 years. There was a capital cost of $433,000 with a grant from BC ACAP, a grant of $289,000. And like I said earlier, we put in a grant application. We submitted that this year for taxiway, apron, pavement, overlay improvements through the ACAP program. Again, the program is a federal program and is designed to support and assist airports with their capital project costs. To be eligible for the ACAP program, an airport must have a commercial carrier, and the runway overlay will be 100% funded, and it is approximately a $3.5 million project, 100%. And we will know in April. In addition to that, we put in another ACAP-funded 100% application for the replacement of our loader and snowblower for the runway. And that is, again, 100%, like I say, and it is a $900,000 application. So I've already spoken to this, but on September the 18th, again, Qualicum Beach Airport participated and then hosted an annual live exercise. A fuselage of an aircraft was brought in as a prop to simulate response to an aircraft crash. There were 3 separate scenarios throughout the day: Qualicum Beach Fire and Rescue, Oceanside RCMP, BC Ambulance, and our public works staff all participated in this Transport Canada required exercise. Training for these scenarios is critical to support agencies' response. So in December of 2023, the Airport Authority, we contacted BC Hydro regarding 3-phase power for the Qualicum Beach Airport. BC Hydro subsequently advised they had retained a consultant to conduct a study to determine present and future requirements at various locations, including Qualicum Beach Airport, with results to be available in the first half of 2025. And we anticipate, Your Worship, that they will identify infrastructure requirements, including the costs provided that will, be necessary to provide 3-phase power to the Qualicum Beach Airport. In late 2023, an airport inquiry tracking system became available. I've spoken to this. Data used in the airport inquiry public inputs data table consists of information gathered from a legacy report system as well as data captured from the new airport inquiry tracking system. The airport inquiry tracking system has become a valuable tool for staff and the public to communicate on airport-related matters. The tracking system collects data such as mapping of complaint locations and the type of complaints from a residential area. This data is beneficial to assist in determining mitigation strategies, as in the case of noise concerns, and to inform public education on airport operations. And again, what's come out of that is the creation of the Good Neighbor program. These show some of those stats that we've been talking about. From June the 16th to November, we've had 116 inputs from 40 addresses. And again, 7 of them were actionable. And as you can see, Your Worship, 5 of them were noise abatement procedure violations, and 2 of them were curfew violations. So in total, we've had 12 actionable items. As you can see there were 7 noise abatement violations and 5 curfew violations. This chart just shows what we've been talking about, and as you can see by the chart, if you go from the top down, the curfew violations that we've talked about, the NAP that we've talked about, and all the other things that we've covered off. But basically what this shows is it shows the last quarter, or last half of this year, rather. Or pardon me, for the full year. Helicopter training, as I mentioned, we've had 12 requests that we authorized at the Qualicum Beach Airport. Training for night vision operations, search and rescue, medevac, long line rescue, and wildfire training. To date, we've had 63.1 hours in total of training at the Qualicum Beach Airport. And again, training is required by Transport Canada to maintain certification. Qualicum Beach Airport with respect to medevacs. It plays a vital role, as I've already spoken to. In 2022, we had 20 medevacs. We had 12 in 2023, and BC Ambulance reports out that we've had 5 to date this year. Most of these medevacs are with rotary wing helicopters. So, Your Worship, with your permission, I'd like to hand this over to Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Mr. Goldfuss. Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we wanted to bring forward a sample of the questions that are currently being asked to staff or to the airport authority. And so this is just a sampling, and I'm sure we'll have some more questions tonight. I do want to assure both the community and council that staff do their very best to answer these questions. We have a designated point of contact with Transport Canada, and I know we have members of the public reaching out to other points of contact to Transport Canada, but again, the town has a designated point of transport for Transport Canada, and we have to follow that process. So I think that's an important preface to some of these questions that are being asked. So, for example, is the Qualicum Beach Airport in the town under any legal obligation to continue allowing flight schools use at the airport? And again, as staff continues to say, the interface between local government authority and the Aeronautics Act is a very complex area of law. And so while Transport Canada, if providing an answer just with Transport Canada's lens, may not consider the other things such as case law that relate to that interface. So again, that's an important preface to some of these questions. Again, our designated point of contact for Transport Canada has recommended that questions of authority for the local government be submitted through them to the judicial branch in Ottawa, and that is the process we're following. So I know there's been some community debate about that, but I do want to assure the community staff continues to take direction from council and act on the recommendation of our designated point of contact at Transport Canada. We've also seen questions about record keeping on the number of landings and takeoffs for the airport. Again, we don't have that kind of data available. We're not controlled airspace. Questions about the flight schools paying costs for capital projects, for example, at the airport. We do have lease arrangements with many of our users at the airport, and there's just a general contribution, so I couldn't say someone is paying X towards the runway paving or X towards the fuel, things like that. Questions about original zoning for Qualicum Woods being a mistake considering alignment of the airport runway. We know the airport has been around since the 50s. I'd hate to presuppose what the council of the day was thinking with the decision making. I think what I can say is residential development in proximity to airports is commonplace. Densification of that residential development probably isn't a best practice, but again, I can't speak to what Council of the Day had to say about that. Questions about noise and health. So if noise becomes a health issue, will the town cover soundproofing added to the most affected homes? It would be very difficult to define what a health issue is, what was, what aircraft were generating that noise, those sorts of things. So a really simple answer to probably a complex question again would be no. What are the town's costs for having the Qualicum Woods and adjoining communities declared an official noise-sensitive area? And this was one of the directions that Council gave to staff through the strategic planning process, and we anticipate this being ratified on December 11th. So really, we anticipate the majority of these costs will simply be staff time and some investigation. So again, we haven't quantified that expense. Another question, has the town ever considered the possibility of decommissioning the airport until noise pollution issues are solved, or to close the airport entirely? I am not aware of any such consideration. A couple other things just that have come in recently. We okay with the public, Your Worship?
I think we are, aren't we? We're just going to have a few more slides, and then we open it up to council for comments and questions, and then to the gallery. Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. So can Qualicum Beach, the operator of the airport, limit air traffic? And this is one of these questions that was submitted directly to Transport Canada. The simple answer, which is literally how the answer begins, the simple answer is yes. And so again, when we talk about that very complex area of law, this is a simple answer to a complex question. So again, this is why we are following the recommendation of our Transport Canada point of contact that says submit questions of authority through them to the judicial branch in Ottawa. So I want to assure both council and the public that that is how staff are proceeding. A couple other samples, and again, happy to entertain questions from the public when we get there. Questions about the noise abatement procedure being voluntary. Again, I think the airport manager answered that it is a regulation and it is enforceable. And questions about, I think this one was the noise-sensitive area map. So again, Transport Canada's response is that the airport can contact their respective aerodrome's principal inspector and discuss additions or changes to the noise-sensitive assigned areas. So again, council has provided that direction to staff. So those are a sampling of questions, and as I say, we anticipate some other great ones being asked tonight, and we'll do our very best to answer those. So next steps, we're looking to engage with senior levels of government, and we're looking forward to implementation of council's strategic initiatives relating to the airport. And I know there's been some discussion about, well, council's given direction, and I think it's important for the public to understand that when Committee of the Whole gives staff direction, it's a recommendation actually to council. So staff hasn't actually received direction until those recommendations are ratified at a subsequent council meeting. So all those directions coming out of strategic planning, we anticipate those to be ratified December 11th, and then we move into action into 2025. So some of the notes of interest, the senior levels of government piece, we did have a residents' petition about leaded fuel, and there has been a response received. And as I've noted, jurisdictional questions of authority will be clarified through Transport Canada to the judicial branch in Ottawa. So basically the response to the petition was that the senior powers are considering amendments to the existing fuel regulations, and this would include the phasing out of lead in gasoline. And they're saying this would be undertaken in line with the US regulations that are expected in the coming years. So they can only proceed to ban the production, import, and sale of leaded avgas when there's a suitable unleaded avgas available for use. And we're not there, but again, I think it was really useful to have this clarified that the senior powers are looking at that, and we'll keep close watch on this in the coming years. As I've said, the municipality's ability to regulate and pass bylaws, very complex area of law. So when Transport Canada speaks to its lens, it's only a piece of the puzzle when providing an answer to the questions we're seeing. Case law exists about local governments having very limited authority in relation to the Aeronautics Act. And because it's so complex, and because there is so much debate in the community about council's authority, that's why the recommendation came to go to the judicial branch. So we'll be working on that. I do want to again remind the public and council that we have a designated process in which we interface with Transport Canada, and the public reaching out to other points of Transport Canada, that's great, but the town has to do its due diligence. I've mentioned that we're hoping for those Committee of the Whole recommendations from strategic planning to be ratified by council on December 11th. And I just thought it would be worth for the public to go through what some of those scoping sheets are. So we saw a recommendation about the Qualicum Beach Airport Master Plan / Business Plan. And the direction was to include $75,000 budget provision for this initiative in fiscal 2026, with the expenditure being 100% grant dependent. We also saw a renaming of that master plan to include Airport Master Plan Business Plan, which expands the scope and title, and that would be referred to 2026 strategic planning for council's consideration. So again, we've already started that blue sky list for next year's strategic planning, and this one will be top of the list. The scoping sheet for the asset management plan for the airport, this will be included in year 2029 with a budget provision of $10,000, which is also grant dependent. I know there's a lot of interest in this one. So this scoping sheet is the investigation of viability and process of expanding the Qualicum Beach Airport Authority noise-sensitive map. So when we saw the earlier version of the map, those are the red and yellow. The yellow is the airport, the red areas are the existing noise-sensitive areas, and then the purple are new areas of investigation. So Committee of the Whole's recommendation was that staff begin the investigation and consultation process with Transport Canada and NAV Canada in 2025 to determine if these areas can be expanded. And the reason why we have to do that is because of the interface with the noise abatement procedure. So council will finalize that direction in December and will trigger into action in 2025 and be reporting back publicly on that. Again, that current noise sensitive area. We're also going to see a Qualicum Beach Airport bylaw review. And so we'll be looking at this in 2025. And while we do this, this is a significant undertaking by staff. And whereas previously we'd been investigating CCTV footage for a large majority of the noise complaints, we'll now only be investigating through that CCTV footage noise complaints that are related to the noise abatement procedure or other aspects of the bylaw. So general noise concerns won't have the footage reviewed because we simply don't have the staffing. We have an airport manager for 3 days of the week, and that will be a large piece of the undertaking, is looking at that airport bylaw, which hopefully renders some really good outcomes for both council and the community. We also had council consider reducing the tax-funded portion of the Qualicum Beach Airport costs. And I think the first step in this is that this will fall into part of that airport bylaw review, and then it will be expanded upon again with the Airport Master Business Plan, which is 100% grant dependent. I think the great thing about that is if council proceeds with the review of that Airport Master Plan and Business Plan, it could be a really useful communication tool in speaking with our regional partners about the airport as a truly regional amenity, whereas right now it's Qualicum Beach. So Committee of the Whole recommends to Council that the initiative titled Reduced Tax Funded Portion of Qualicum Beach not be included in the 2025 to 2029 financial plan, and that's only because we're going to consider it in those other initiatives. So I do want to say that a lot of great work is underway. Staff will continue to present out quarterly, and the next airport forum after tonight is scheduled for June 25th, 2025, and then we'll see a second one in December of 2025 as well. So again, thank you, Your Worship, to both Council and the community for showing up, and I'll turn that back to you for public input. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Varela. Before we go to public, I ask Council any questions or comments. Councillor Harrison and then Councillor Van der Valk.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just through you to Mr. Goldfuss. We got an email, and from what I recall you telling us and what the email said, it was basically completely backwards. So it's about the scheduled service, any scheduled service to YVR. Could you just describe what it means to fly on instrumentation and what that route is and why it's required to be a particular route?
Mr. Goldfuss.
Thank you, Your Worship. So IFR rules are different than VFR rules. IFR are instrument flight rules and VFR are visual flight rules. So our commercial carrier, or any aircraft for that matter, but I think your question is with the commercial carrier, when they file their flight plan, they get their direction from YVR, NAV Canada, at the YV airport, okay, because NAV Canada controls the airspace. So we've had some questions. Why would they be flying IFR, for an example, on a nice sunny day, right? One may think that instrument flight rules are only for bad weather conditions. Well, that's not necessarily the case sometimes. So when we look at our air carrier, often they will be flying IFR, and basically it's to control flow of traffic for Vancouver International Airport. Okay, and what that means is that they are so large and they got so many balls in the air with aircraft. So basically, they put aircraft and pilots on instrumentation so that they can manage the load. It basically comes down to managing the load in this case. So does that answer the question?
Sort of. There was an email we received saying if someone's on instrument flight regulation, they don't have to fly over any inhabited areas in town, and it's actually backwards because they're on that instrumentation. They have to fly out 2 kilometers, then turn right, and just follow a pre-designated flight path that they have no control over as the operator, is my understanding. Is that correct?
So with the noise abatement procedure, it only applies to visual flight rules. It does not apply to instrument flight rules. And the reason for that is because there is a directive from NAV Canada on that flight path, okay, with that instrument flight rule, okay, and they must follow it. So for an example, if our noise abatement procedure, a pilot just can't arbitrarily go around it and adhere to that noise abatement procedure when they've been given specific instruction through IFR from NAV Canada, if that makes sense. We have someone, I believe, the chief pilot here from the airline, and I would ask that when the opportunity arises that he come up and he can speak more detail to that, and I think that may be a good thing.
That's a very, very good deferral. Was that answering your question? Councillor Vennevaag.
I had just one quick question, and it may have already been covered, but if there is a violation of the noise abatement procedure, is there any repercussion to the pilot or any fees or fines for that violation?
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, there could be fines. So what we elect to do as the airport authority is we'd like to take a softer approach. And what I mean by that is, and I mentioned it earlier, we write a letter to them. And what we're finding is through that, we don't have reoccurrence. If that was to reoccur from that same aircraft, then we would take a different approach. So if we had a reoccurrence, then we would send it directly to Transport Canada. Once Transport Canada receives it, it's out of our hands. It's no longer the airport authority's business in terms of we cannot impose a fine or anything like that. We just send the information as per the violation off to Transport Canada. To date, since I've been here as your APM, I have not done that. And again, we are finding that, you know, we are not getting any reoccurrences. The other thing I think to note is, and one of the reasons why we do that as well, it's more timely. If I were to send that letter off to Transport Canada, it could take up to a year before that is dealt with. So I think by doing what we're doing, it is working, and like I say, it's more timely.
Councillor Skipsey.
Okay, I'm just going to seek a little clarification about the numbers on the complaints. So from June to November, there were 95 noise concerns related to the flight path. But then when I look at the cumulative for the year, the number of noise concerns for the flight path is only 27. So am I to believe that maybe they were looked at and decided that it actually fit better into one of the other categories?
Thank you, Your Worship. So we report from June to November that we've had 95 noise concerns. That is correct. And from January for the whole year, we have all of these noise concerns that are accumulative, right? So the total number is again 221 inputs. We haven't broken it out more specifically to the noise concerns, but that is the data that we're showing.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. So just through Chair Mr. Goldfuss, when we did the Committee of the Whole looking at the scoping sheet for adding the noise-sensitive area, you weren't present. And so this is very much an airport issue. It might have been helpful to have Mr. Goldfuss in the room when we were discussing this. But I'm just curious, because if I recall correctly, the staff recommendation was to not proceed with that. I'm just wondering if you could provide some detail on the rationale as to why the staff recommendation was to not proceed with it originally.
Ms. Frilla.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could I have the question reiterated? And I'd like to just step back to what was my attention. I'm apparently not juggling very well tonight. So the concern that Councillor Skipsey put forward is there could be a conflict in the table on page 3 and page 4 of the staff report. And so we will take a look at that and come back to clarify at a subsequent meeting. Thank you. And the question then, Your Worship, the subsequent?
Yeah, just when we originally did our scoping sheets in the Committee of the Whole originally, the staff recommendation for adding the noise-sensitive areas was to not proceed with that. And I was just wondering if staff could give some feedback on why they made that recommendation originally, because we went in a different direction than the original staff recommendation. And I think having a little bit more detail at the time when we made the decision might have been helpful. So I'm just curious. It's still Committee of the Whole at the end of the day. Before we finally ratify things on the 11th, we just get that background on why that was the recommendation from staff.
Sure, and you spoke to it earlier, so go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And we can bring that specific scoping sheet to the meeting on the 11th to let Council look at it. Again, I think it's going to be more complicated than is anticipated because of the potential conflict with the noise abatement procedure. So again, we can pull that scoping sheet, bring it to the 11th, and we can take a greater look at that with the airport manager in attendance.
Councillor Harrison.
And just to follow up, the two issues I had with it when I first saw it was one, any scheduled carrier has to, that flies to Vancouver, has to fly through that area no matter what. And I'm just wondering if that would create a real awkward moment in the public where, why is that plane always going through the noise-sensitive area? I am so angry, when they have no choice, they have to. And that would be one thing. And the second thing was just with the Good Neighbor program, we have the sign which says on runway 11, turn south as soon as possible. And then just looking at the angles where you have that new square, basically, adjacent to the existing one. Is that something where a pilot would normally be turning naturally, and do they have to then basically say, well, okay, I have to go a little bit further, maybe, and then it might be just sort of one more thing for them to worry about when they're trying to essentially pull out. And since we might be looking at this at the 11th, I'm just posing that as things discussed 11th. We don't need the answer immediately, just flagging. Those are the things that I might be totally off. It might be no problem at all, but those are just the two things that I was hoping to get feedback on originally.
All right, so we'll get back to that on December 11th with that particular question and those concerns. Anything else from Council? All right, now it's up to the gallery, that's you. And I just want to remind you that this is a respectful workplace. So we want to make sure that everybody here, including staff and council members and all of you, that you feel safe and comfortable and confident that if anybody interrupts you or says anything inappropriate, that the chair or member council will help me to step in and stop that. So with that, who would like to speak first? And I think we have a speakers list, so if I could get the speakers list, we'll start with that. Thank you. All right, first one, sequence sort.
Good evening, Your Worship.
Just a sec. Hey, please in the back, if you could stop it, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, learned staff, members of the community. I thank you all for this opportunity to review this important matter and this gem of an asset to Qualicum Beach and the regional area. I think that the committee has been doing tremendous work and has been doing its due diligence, dotting I's, crossing T's from where I sit, with perfection. Good ideas are being imported from other areas and instituted, and we're enjoying great success. And I commend everyone for having those open and honest attitudes of how we can work together and serve our community and serve the region. As a longtime user of the airport, in many capacities, I have to say that I don't know a pilot, woman or man, that isn't sensitive to getting the job done with excellence. And the pursuit of excellence is a goal that is unattainable. We're always trying to do something better. Every time we fly, we could have done something better. And the training regime has spawned a great many pilots for the Canadian Armed Forces out of Qualicum Airport, for the airlines, and also for pleasure pilots. It's a transportation hub. It's an incredibly important link. We learned that with the not Horn Lake fire, but the Cameron Lake fire. The airport was suddenly a very important link to the west coast of Vancouver Island. And we don't know what else is coming our way. We heard Kevin Goldfuss talk about the training that is mandatory for the town of Qualicum staff to be ready when unexpected events happen. And council is doing a great job in helping them keep ready. And we don't know what's coming next year, but I have every confidence in the staff at the airport. I have every confidence in NAV Canada, Transport Canada, and the local pilots, the airlines, to continue being professionals in every way, shape, or form. As a Western Chair for the Canadian Owner Pilots Association and as a volunteer pilot for Hope Air flying medevacs out of Qualicum, both of those organizations invite anybody to contact their websites and ask questions and learn more about how your airport is serving you and your community. I wish you all a great holiday season. Stay healthy and happy.
Thank you. Next is Douglas Durant. Douglas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Durant is the last name. 2015 of this year, we arrived in Qualicum Beach. I don't know, it's been a goal of mine since the early 90s when I was involved with McMillan Bodell. A great little community, but the thing that impressed us the most was in the purchase of our house, we had what was described to us a legal and binding covenant attached to the description of the house that we were buying, and that was an advisory to us to understand the idiosyncrasies, the things that we should be aware of as a homeowner. It was legal and binding. It was part of the title. We had to sign off that we understood, accepted, and were agreeable to these issues. My specific issue was groundwater. Had nothing to do with noise, even though I'm 3 miles off the end of the 2-9 departure or the 1-1 arrival. Noise isn't an issue to me. but I understand where it could be to those that aren't informed about it. And that if we look at the duties that we would have, duties of care, relative to our participation as council members, knowing or should have known that issues could be a potential problem, as they potentially could have been for me if I'd have not known there were groundwater issues, drainage issues associated with my property when I bought it. The thing that saved me was the legal and binding covenant attached to my property. Can we not do the same thing as it relates to noise issues and the 52 addresses relative to the 221 inputs we've had year to date? I would certainly want to know, if I was buying a home, if there are noise issues, rather than me buying a home and finding out later and appearing, since the early 70s when we first discovered this through Mayor Skipsey, who wanted to ban circuits, to 2024 now, and we're being directed by 52 addresses. So that would be my suggestion. It's just a legal and binding covenant to those that own a home that are bothered by noise, that would act as an advisory and indemnify council because they knew or should have known there was going to be an issue, and they had a duty of care to the public in Qualicum Beach to advise them. Not unlike our multi-million-dollar project we got at the golf course, right off the end of runway 29. And I wonder if they know that they're building right next to an airport. Just my thoughts, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Durant. Sorry, stop, please stop. Because I want people who may not agree with that to also feel comfortable speaking. And when they hear somebody else being applauded, they may not want to speak something that's not quite the same. So please don't. I understand it, but please don't. Thank you. Who's next? Oh, we got a list. Wendy Monroe?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak at the Committee of the Whole Airport Review meeting. I live in the Qualicum Woods neighborhood on McQuinna. In 2014, my husband and I bought our house in the Qualicum Woods neighborhood. In the beginning, it was a quiet neighborhood with very little irritating noise from small planes flying overhead. In 2016, I started noticing small planes flying directly over our neighborhood more and more. I learned later on that the flight path had been changed. In the last few years, the disruptive noise from the engines of some of these planes has become more prominent. It was especially noisy and irritating this summer. For the last few summers, it has not been pleasant to be outside, working in the yard, doing gardening, listening to music, or reading. It's hard to relax on the patio outside in the summer with the almost constant deafening noise from some of these airplanes. Sometimes I need to plug my ears. That's so noisy it can be. Can you imagine? Other times we have to stop our conversations with neighbors and forget about talking on the cell phone. Last week, my husband was attending an outdoors fly fishing class behind the Ravensong swimming pool. Twice the instructor had to quit speaking to his students and wait for the planes to move out of the area. It was too noisy for the students to hear the instructor. The quality of life in our community has deteriorated significantly. If we had known that we would be living under the present-day flight path, we would not have bought in Qualicum Woods or even in Qualicum Beach. As this intolerable situation has been ongoing since 2016, my question is, why are we allowing this to ruin the enjoyment of our town's environment? As the owner-operator of the airport, It is within your scope to rectify past mistakes and set new rules, such as prohibiting flight schools from operating out of the Qualicum Beach Airport. It is long past time to acknowledge taxpayers' concerns, complaints, and suggestions. It is now time for Mayor and Council to act in our best interests as opposed to placing the interests of the airport's leaseholders first. Years of not acting on our concerns are ruining Qualicum Beach's reputation as a retirement destination. Family and friends who visit with an eye to retire here are crossing Qualicum Beach off their list once they experience the chaos in our skies from low-flying helicopters and the constant noise of flight school planes that continuously circle overhead. In closing, I'm asking Mayor and Council to take residents' airport complaints to heart and to take action to remove this ongoing disruption to our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Monroe. Next is Mr. Provost, Todd.
Mayor, council, and staff, thank you for holding this meeting to discuss the important issues surrounding the impacts of the airport on our community. CAO Varela recently indicated the town is exploring municipal bylaws in relation to the Aeronautics Act, and this is being referred to Transport Canada's legal branch in Ottawa. This approach raises concerns as there are numerous examples of municipalities who have tried to use bylaws in relation to airports. These attempts were challenged in various courts and failed. The town itself is fully aware of this issue. It was the town who repeatedly stated to the public when residents asked about using our town noise bylaws or business licenses to assist with airport issues that it is the Aeronautics Act which is the proper authority for these matters, not bylaws. Continuing down this road is confusing, considering the vast evidence that it is not a way to proceed that will assist in finding solutions. On the contrary, Transport Canada told us directly. In our meeting, Mr. Dow and myself, we met with Transport Canada officials, and the information we have repeatedly shared with the town and was that the official said working with the town on expanding noise-sensitive areas was the way to go to find solutions for the noise issues. At no time did Transport Canada suggest to proceed by way of a bylaw. We have also provided the town with the relevant sections from the Canadian Aviation Regulations on noise controls, and also the detailed measures that airport operators are fully able to employ to assist when noise is an issue for the community. And some of those measures I provided to council ahead of time. These measures are from Transport Canada's own Aeronautical Information Manual, and all of them are fully available to the town to employ. The information manual applies to a long list of airport-related people, including airport operators, which the town is, and pilots. There is no mention of relying on bylaws in the Transport Canada legislation or policy manuals. We also recently shared with you that Transport Canada replied in writing to a local resident that the town as airport operators is able to enact many measures to control noise issues if they wish to do so, and that's an exact quote from the Transport Canada. Again, absolutely no mention of relying upon bylaws to enact these measures. Now, the town were told this is a complex legal matter, which we all fully understand, and it was suggested to go to Transport Canada's legal branch for advice. But we already know that it is complex. In fact, we know that it is an avenue that has failed to succeed many times when it has been attempted elsewhere. Mr. Sword, who spoke earlier, the Western Chair for the Pilots Association, spoke to you back in July at the town meeting at the airport, and he warned that similar attempts had already been challenged up to the Supreme Court level. The town should be asking Transport Canada advice on how to proceed using the existing noise control authorities for airport operators under the Aeronautics Act. These authorities do exist and therefore would succeed in helping the entire community. Now, we are thankful to the town for enacting the Good Neighbor program and attempting to educate pilots on ways they can assist the wider community by slight alterations to their behavior. The most effective of the changes would be to fly away from the more populated areas of the town when safe to do so. Unfortunately, the vast majority of pilots are still flying north of the railway tracks towards heavily populated areas. The result then is that residents are still experiencing extremely loud noise levels of noise and potential exposure to lead on a daily basis. Many residents have documented and presented proof of these activities to the town, including that sometimes these flight events occur 2 and 3 times within 1 minute. Qualicum Woods Residents Association continues to receive feedback from residents who are thoroughly frustrated with the daily impacts of airport noise on the quality of life, such as this recent comment, and quote, "I am quite sure now that I will not be living too many more years here at my lovely home. I cannot live a life surrounded by aircraft engine noise. The town has given me no hope that they will be able to persuade pilots to stop taking their planes over. We know what we hear and what we see. We have logged and submitted the information of noise in low-flying planes, including photos and videos at times, to the town's complaint system. However, the complaint system itself, and I do stress that itself, we value that there's a complaint system and we value the data that it provides and helps everybody. But the complaint system itself feels like it is failing to assist addressing the overall goal of reducing noise for the community. The replies to complaints are difficult to understand at times, as they may not be accounting for the less technical, less easily investigated technical complaints. We have submitted complaints about planes turning to the north below 1,000 feet, which are codified in the noise abatement procedure requirement and which are potential violations. Often the reply to these complaints is that the planes we specified haven't been below 1,000 feet. So one question I would like to ask now, and I hope we can receive an answer, how is it determined whether planes are flying above or below the approved heights in the noise abatement procedure? We also have asked for guidance on how we might better determine the height ourselves to assist with complaints, but have yet to receive a reply. So you can understand that while many of these complaints may have been classified in your staff reporting as not substantial, these are technical classifications only. All of the noise complaints are concerns that still have an impact on our community. There are 9,300 residents impacted by daily airport noise and potentially lead exposure if they live about 3 kilometers of the airport. These impacts are created by a small number of pilots. Considering it require only slight changes in behavior and pose only a minor inconvenience to them, it only seems fair that this very small group of pilots should be willing to make minor changes for the greater good of the entire community. We do thank those pilots who are already being considerate of our community when they make flight choices to fly away from densely populated areas. Adopting similar behaviors by all would go a long way towards pilots and the community coexisting. However, the hesitancy to voluntarily adopt new behaviors is why we continue to stress the urgency and importance of expanding the existing noise-sensitive areas to include Qualicum Woods, the Evergreens, and the Aldous, Hemsworth, Cottonwood neighborhoods. This is why we have been asking for some time for staff to start work on these improvements. Now, the confusion over the town's abilities to enact these rules that exist and the policies that exist is why we continue to stress the importance of a meeting with Transport Canada and the citizen representatives most impacted by airport noise on a daily basis. We have repeatedly volunteered to meet with the town and Transport Canada to assist to find solutions for our community. We want to highlight that there was recently some positive feedback received from Environment Canada in response to our petition on the health dangers of leaded aviation fuel, and Ms. Varela alluded to this in her presentation as well. You, Council, also wrote to the federal government as these are concerns shared by the town. Environment Canada wrote that, quote, eliminating remaining sources of lead in gasoline including leaded aviation gasoline, is a priority for the Government of Canada. Environment and Climate Change Canada is considering amendments to Canada's existing fuel regulations, which would include the phase-out of lead in gasoline, as noted in the department's Forward Regulatory Plan, 2024 to 2026. This phase-out would be undertaken in response to the final endangerment finding for leaded aviation gasoline published in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in October 2023. In moving forward on this issue, Environment Canada will continue to work closely with Transport Canada to ensure the required certifications are in place to allow the use of unleaded fuel alternatives once available in piston engine aircraft, unquote. And I thank you as well, and we appreciate that finally, after years of advocacy, that we received an informative and positive reply from Environment and Climate Change Canada. In closing, I think it's important we focus on the goals for our community and the facts. The town manages the airport. You have measures to control noise available to you. Please fix this for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Provost. Next is Joanne Tudor.
Mayor Westbrook and members of council. As you know, many of us are experiencing a significant impact on our quality of life and peace due to noise and lead pollution caused by activities at our airport. I respectfully request your leadership in addressing these issues and restoring peace and quiet to our community. None of this was a concern for me until 2023, when the number and frequency of flights over my neighborhood of Qualicum Woods began to escalate. Before this, I would never have complained about the noise. I believe it's accurate to say that although there may be training involved, neither medevac nor firefighting aircraft use this airport as their base. I believe the primary source of the disturbance is the constant circuit training. The constant loud orbits, particularly on pleasant days when many of us are outside, have made it difficult to enjoy our yards and gardens or be able to carry on a normal conversation outdoors. Just last Thursday, after a long rain, the sun came out. I went out to my garden only to experience an hour of low-flying planes. At one point, there were 2 in the air at once, making it impossible to relax. Yesterday afternoon was a similar disturbing experience outside my home, working in my yard. Along with the noise, the use of leaded aviation fuel at the airport remains a serious concern. The pollution from this fuel contaminates our air, soil, and water, putting our residents, especially children, at risk. Health Canada and BC Health have documented the health consequences of this pollution, which cannot be ignored. While our Good Neighbor program aims to reduce noise by encouraging pilots to avoid densely populated areas, and we appreciate the efforts that went into that very much. But the noise continues to be my experience, and others I know of who have similar complaints in nearby communities. Additionally, we've seen planes return over our neighborhood, undoing the progress that we had hoped for. Transport Canada has confirmed in writing that our town has the authority to implement regulations to address noise pollution. While the town feels it needs to seek a legal opinion, I urge you to recognize the urgency of this issue. The noise and pollution are real experiences for myself and others almost every day, except during bad weather. The town should act now as it did in 1978 when Alderman Skipsey introduced a policy whereby no touch-and-go circuits were to fly on Saturday, Sunday, or holidays between May 1st and September 30th. I don't wish to undermine the work of pilots. We need to find a balance. I ask the town to take proactive steps now, such as limiting flight hours for training and taking a stronger stance on flight paths. These actions would reduce the noise and exposure to lead while allowing the airport to continue operating with very little operational change. I'm not against aviation, but our health and quality of life must be considered. I trust that with your leadership, we can find a solution that works for everyone. Thank you to the pilots who already avoid populated areas. Your consideration is greatly appreciated. At the September strategic planning meeting, Mayor Westbrook and Ann Skipsey both stated that the people of Qualicum Beach deserve peace and quiet and a solution to the noise problem. This statement gives me great hope that we can work this out and as a win-win for the benefit of us all. Mayor Westbrook and Council, I look forward to working together to improve the quality of life for our community and for the younger generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tudor. Next is Ms. Dow, Carol Dow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. It's good to be with you again for this very important meeting. I've just returned from back east at our family farm where the highest plane was at 20,000 feet and we didn't have any small planes flying over us, so it was a joy. For those of you who don't know me, my husband and I, Bob Nickel, in the old days of 1984, bought our home in Qualicum Woods, and it was a peaceful time. There were no planes flying over, and as you know, things changed in about, was it 2016, 17, and there, where the flight path changed. Now, I particularly want to speak to you about also representing many caregivers who are taking care of older, retired folks in Qualicum Woods. They want to remain in their home. They prefer not to be in a nursing home. And to have the continual flights flying over as people are being taken care of, recovering from surgery, going through palliative care, just so many diagnoses of where they're being taken care of, to have that quiet, peaceful lifestyle taken away from us has been very hard. I'm just speaking on behalf of so many people. I'd like to ask, there was a slide, Ms. Varela, if you could show it, and I'd like to have a copy of it, the one that had the stats of the number of calls that were coming in. I seem to remember something about 116, and then I heard somebody refer to a number of 200. I can honestly tell you, Mr. Goldfuss, am I allowed to just speak to him for just a moment? Okay, just to say that I personally have sent in emails because I don't know how to handle the computer. There's so much difficulty trying to report the noise. And I know I have sent in at least 25 or 30 over the past year complaints. So it's important, I'd like, if you may, ask him the question, does he record the email records that I've sent into those stats?
Once you take a seat, I will ask staff to prepare questions to all the answers to all the questions that we're hearing today. So there will be a report, probably at the next committee of the whole meeting or the council meeting, where we have responses that are well thought out and factual for all the questions that we have raised today. So that'll be one of them. But you're welcome to a copy of the sheet you're referring to.
Yes, I would really appreciate that.
Okay.
And I can summarize my emails that I sent to Mr. Goldfuss so that those total numbers are recorded. And I only record the absolute loudest roaring planes that are flying over. So we want to be clear about that. So I mentioned about the flight path. The noise-sensitive area is the other thing that I'm concerned about as I was seeing this on the slides there, as to why Qualicum Woods, who is the most effective, is not in that area. That's a question I'd like to ask as to, the flights are directly over our houses, not over Eagle Crest or Chartwell. So why are we not included in that noise-sensitive area? So if we could please get an answer to that. And because there's been some rumor that we do not want the airport, I want to be crystal clear. I use that airport 4 times a year minimum, flying to the mainland to connect to a Delta flight to get back east. And I'm just saying, I want to thank Kevin, who has been our pilot at Isqua Air, for doing an incredible job. I don't know if he's here, but he's yay. Okay. So again, thank you very much for hearing me, and I hope that you hear our heart. There's as many people who are speaking to you that we've been trying to cope for a long time with the noise level, and we just need your help desperately. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think what we can do, because if we go back and forth, we'll be here for a very long meeting. But I trust that staff is keeping track of the questions that are raised and that we respond to them. But I can tell you that most of the discussion that I've heard so far is being addressed in the scoping sheets of our strategic plan, which will come forward on December 11th. So we are trying to deal with how can we change the noise abatement procedure, how we can change the noise sensitive areas. So we are working on that. But that was just a recommendation from a committee like this to Council, which will be addressing those on December 11th. Ms. Varela.
Just point of clarification there, Your Worship. We won't be looking at the noise abatement procedure. It's the noise-sensitive area map. So just for clarity, thank you.
And I think that's what most people are concerned about, is the noise-sensitive areas. All right. Next is J.C. Pinhello. Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of council and members of the community. I'm a newly minted medevac pilot, and I finished my training in Qualicum in my time building. So I want to thank the community for putting up with my noise. I do assure you that I tried to glide all the way down when I could to keep my noise down. But small airports like Qualicum are critical for training. Sorry?
Qualicum Beach.
Qualicum Beach, sorry. Yeah. Qualicum Beach Airport is critical for flight training. There's a shortage of pilots. I'm sure you've seen the increase in cost of flying. There's not enough pilots. There's not enough of us. And I'm currently based in northern Saskatchewan right now and getting my first job there. And I hope to return to the community and serve this community locally once I have some more hours. But I just want to say thank you to everyone, and sorry for the noise, but we're very critical to everyone's enjoyment, both personal travel and medevac with the limited medical facilities in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pinella. Next is Darren Hodgson? Yeah, Darren Hodgson. Where's Darren? There you are.
Good evening. My name is Darren Hodgson, and I live in Qualicum Woods. My wife and I have just had our first baby. We are impacted by the daily flights and increasing noise of the airport and are concerned about the effects of leaded fuel on ours and our baby's health. Aircrafts using aviation gasoline or avgas emit harmful pollutants, including lead, which can negatively affect local air quality. This toxic substance can settle into nearby farmland, potentially contaminating crops and impacting agricultural production local farms produce. I know of 2 farms in the area on Qualicum Road. They could become tainted by these contaminants, harming both the environment and the health of the consumers. Furthermore, studies have shown that exposure to lead can have severe neurological effects, particularly on children. Lead exposure has been linked to cognitive impairments, lower IQ, and developmental delays. This is not just a theoretical concern. It's a public health issue that could affect the well-being of our community for generations to come. We need to carefully consider whether the benefits of this airport upgrade outweigh these potential health risks. According to recent reports, Canadians collectively carry over $100 billion in credit card debt, a reflection of the increasing financial pressure many families are facing. I am very concerned that almost $1,000 plus per day of taxpayer money is spent running the airport. Our taxes are going up again substantially next year, and a portion of this is going to fund an airport that is doing my family much more harm than good. Does this make sense for the future of our community? Does this mean more noise and lead pollution for the future? Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgson. Next is Sue Willis.
All right. Can you hear me? Yeah, I don't need to lower it down, I'm short. Mayor Westbrook and members of council and community members, thank you for hosting this meeting. I understand, or I read, that the purpose of the meeting is to explore strategies to ensure the airport remains a valuable asset for a community. I just wanted to take one step back, and I asked myself, and I wanted to ask everybody, is the airport a valuable asset for our community? So to do that, normally I would do the pros and cons. So I thought, okay, well, let's look at the benefits from the airport. Emergency services, absolutely, and the people that they serve. I am in full support of these essential services. But if we didn't have an airport in Qualicum Beach, we would still have full access to these services. An airport is necessary for airplanes, but helicopters can land, they're very versatile, and they can land in school fields, farmers' fields, parking lots, et cetera. And there's many other airports close by that can be used for refueling and landing. Fire suppression crews are based out of Port Alberni and use their home airport as their base. The other entity that benefits from the airport is the commercial airline, Isqueo, and its passengers. However, they only seat 7 people on a flight. So this is not a significant number of people flying in and out, and many are not residents of Qualicum Beach. So the airline company benefits, but there's not a substantial benefit to the community. The amount of people that they bring in is insignificant to the economy of the town. I know I've heard, oh, well, they eat at restaurants and they buy things, but it's not a huge number of people. The other people that benefit are a few private pilots, many of whom are not residents of Qualicum Beach, and the flight school and the students, again, many of whom are not residents from Qualicum Beach. So I was just trying to look at how it is a valuable asset for our community. So then I looked at the cons. Let's look at who pays the price for the airport and the negative effect on Qualicum Beach residents. So the residents pay the price for the airport in many ways due to the noise, the health risk, and financially. The noise, I'll do first. The noise from the airplanes has been unbearable for many residents living in Qualicum Woods, Eagle Crest, Chartwell, and in my area, Rupert Road and Pheasant Glen areas. The town has received an overwhelming amount of complaint letters relating to the noise of the airplanes, and many residents show up to town meetings to express their displeasure. I myself wrote a letter in October complaining about the noise that was so loud that, like many people I've heard today, we had to stop our conversation every time a plane flew over. So I got out my watch and I timed, and on that evening, a plane flew over on average every 1 minute and 48 seconds. And I'm not talking a plane flying high over, I'm talking a plane taking off from the airport really low. So it's very loud when they're low. When they're just flying through the community and over, I don't think that bothers any of us, but it's the taking off. And there have been many other instances when we've been entertaining in our garden and have had the same situation where we just can't carry on a conversation. And I'm assuming that these takeoff and landings are from the flight school because it's the same planes. I look and I go, oh, that's that plane again. And it's the same plane going over doing circuits. Often there's two doing that at the same time. Not sure, but that was my assumption. I listened to Kevin Goldfuss and was very appreciative that the council and the airport listened to residents' complaints about the noise, so came out with the Good Neighbor Plan. That's excellent, but I don't like it at all because now when they turn left, when safe to do so, they fly right over me and my neighbors. And to me, it seems like a Band-Aid because you're looking after these residents here, but annoying the ones over here. So every time a plane goes over, I guess I'll go back. We bought our home 4 years ago, and one of the reasons we bought where we bought was it wasn't in the flight path, but now it is. So that I appreciate everybody being collaborative and working together, but maybe just listen to a few voices of who it's affecting now. So that was the noise. The pollution is another downside to the airport that I see. The fuel used for the small aircraft that use the Qualicum Beach Airport is leaded fuel. On October 18th, 2023, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced its final determination that emissions of lead from aircraft that operate on leaded fuel cause or contribute to air pollution, which may reasonably endanger public health and welfare. And according to an administrator from the EPA, this is a quote, "The science is clear. Exposure to lead can cause irreversible and lifelong health effects in children. Aircraft that use leaded fuel are the dominant source of lead emissions in our air." And according to an EPA representative in California, quote, "Communities where general aviation airports are located have suffered from lead exposure and pollution for years. Children living near such airports have been found to have lead in their blood. This is a public health and environmental crisis. Aircraft that operate on leaded aviation gasoline are typically small piston engine aircraft that carry 2 to 10 passengers." During my research, I also found that homes within a 3-kilometer radius of an airport are most affected, and that both Health Canada and BC Health have documented similar findings about the negative health effects of leaded fuel exhaust from aircraft. Earlier in the meeting, I heard that everyone was aware of this issue, and it was going to be something that you'd be dealing with in the coming years, phasing it out. But that doesn't help our health now, or the little baby out in the lobby right now. To me, I know the noise drives me crazy, but I actually see the pollution as a worse problem than the noise. Because the noise, okay, it bothers my ears and irritates me. It kind of drives me crazy, actually. But the health issue, to me, is extreme. The airport was established in 1954. And at that time, there were not nearly as many residents in the town of Qualicum Beach. The airport was out of town. Now that the town has grown to the size that it is, many homes are now very close to the flight path. And I feel that the town has outgrown the airport. There are 4 other airports close by for people to use for transit, flight schools, and hobby flying: Port Alberni, Nanaimo, Comox, and Campbell River. It seems redundant to have an airport in Qualicum Beach when the nearby airports are far more equipped and suited for air traffic. And if you look at the location of these other airports and the direction of their runways, there's far less impact on the residences than that of the Qualicum Beach Airport, where the planes fly directly over many homes. My last con would be the taxpayers' money, which we've already talked about. It costs a great deal of taxpayers' money and to have the airport, and it includes the Qualicum Beach residents as well as government grants, some of which could be put towards other resources. Some are strictly for the airport, but there are grants that we could use for other things. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say, instead of looking at exploring strategies to ensure the airport remains a valuable asset for a community, I just took a step back and asked, is it a valuable asset for our community? And it's my conclusion that a resource that benefits far more people outside our community than inside our community is not a valuable community resource. And this is especially true when it causes the residents much distress with the constant and excessive noise, the cost of the taxpayers, or the use of the taxpayers' money that could be used towards more beneficial community services. And it's a proven, documented, and serious health threat to the residents. So I ask that the council take my points into account when making any decisions regarding the future of the airport. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. Next is Jim Noel.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Jim Noel. I live in Qualicum Beach. I have with me tonight a copy of the Town of Qualicum Beach Bylaw number 789, which is the 2024 to 2028 bylaw, financial plan bylaw. Attached to it is a statement of objectives and policies of the town. And I'm just going to quote from this. The objective: over the next 5 years, the town will continue to review the proportion of revenue that it has received from user fees and charges to determine whether the user fee component could be increased to lessen the requirement for property taxation. Under policies, it says, the town will review all user fees and parcel taxes to ensure that they are adequately meeting the costs of service. This will include cemetery, airport, licenses and permits, and all other charges and fees. Now, I bring that up because I noticed that when I was at the budget meetings earlier this year, this month, and including the one on November 27th, there were draft budgets presented for the operations of the town. So there's ones for drainage, transportation, parks, etc., including one for the airport. And I noticed that all of the other ones included a thing that showed what the net property taxes required for those various departments were, except for the airport. That was missing. And I wonder why. The other thing I note is that one thing was brought up tonight is that there's no records kept of landings and takeoffs at the airport. I was under the impression that people paid to either land or take off or something along those lines, and I find it difficult to believe that that's going to be happening if we're not keeping track of that. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Noel. Did I pronounce that properly? Noel? Noel, thank you. Next is Anthea Stammer.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for taking all our questions. We all really appreciate it. So the main concerns about the airport are the noise levels and the pollution. And I think that both of them could be mitigated. If you, on the North Shore, when there are too many people hiking in an area, you have to apply to hike on that trail. And so if they did the same thing here, Qualicum Airport is a small airport. It's not meant to be a major airport. And so if they limited the number of flights coming in, then the noise level and the pollution would be lessened. So you have to sign up for the trails with something like you sign up with Parks BC, and you have to say what day and whether the morning or afternoon where you want to hike. And the number of people allowed on that trail are limited. So that could be one way that we could mitigate both of these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stammer. Francis, and I'm sorry, I can't read the last name, Hulub. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors, and thanks for a well-turned-out support for, well, especially my community of Qualicum Woods. The whole proceedings today have made me very, very, very sad. And I've been, since June 6th, I've been suffering with shingles and the post-neuralgia with it, so I'm not better. And I attribute a lot of my stress to what's going on in my neighborhood with the airport. And when I read in Transport Canada that the main outcome is a stress-related illness, I get very concerned for where I'm living. And I get very concerned with the people here who are saying that they're having bad effects. And people who just left were talking about their organic garden, and they're saying, we've lost our business because of lead contamination. And people with small children must be very, very concerned. And it's a real fix that we are in right now. And even though everybody here has been trying to help this fix, it's not working right now. And there's not enough incentive. And that's why on my question list that I sent in here, I asked for the decertification of the airport. Even if it is temporary, just to get us through all of the things that are supposed to be provided through Transport Canada, NAV Canada, et cetera. We can put the airport used to be closed in the winter. There was no shoveling of snow. There's ways of just saying, we're going to take a little break here until spring to see if we can sort out these problems, sort out the problems of the health issues, the noise issues, which really affect me horribly. And I might be one of the bigger contributors to the form on your line to report issues, which and I'm leaving that now. I don't even report anymore. I've got my flight radar and I can go and check, but I'm at a loss. And I'm at a loss with my health. And I'm at a loss with my friends and my neighbors who are over and over going through this agony of, how are we going to get out of this fix? If I go and try and sell my house now, and in the real estate forums, there used to be a full disclosure. And every place I've moved to, I've asked, why are the people moving? So I now tell my realtor, my full disclosure is the noise and the air pollution from the airport. Now, our taxes in Qualicum Woods are going to drop. People aren't going to get the value for their property that perhaps they got when they bought in. This is serious, serious business. And this council has to be really, really courageous in making the decision for the future. Because I'm aghast, and I think my neighbors are too. There are several here. And they have come up to me and asked me, what about all this noise going on? And I said, well, we're going to have to display acts of courage ourselves and go and talk to you people about how awful it is to live in that community now. And it was wonderful at one time, and there are great people there, great, fine people. And I want you people here to support them and do the right thing. And it isn't little this and that and that and this. This is serious. This is health. This is taxes that you would receive. And I think it's high time that as a group, we all buckled down and did petitions, did information, handed out more information, go around and solicit What are your complaints about the airport? How is it affecting you? How is it affecting your health? And I just think sometimes about when you're raising taxes too. A lot of people here are on fixed incomes, and when you start raising taxes with people who are retired, and you start, you're bringing a lot of stress to people here. And the airport, and my recognizance of it, is not that important to me. It's not that important. It's not essential. And thank you very much for letting me speak.
You're welcome. Thanks, Miss. Next is the John Simmons.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for letting us speak. I live in Qualicum Woods, just around the corner from Fran, and we call it right under the flight path of Iskwoo. That's where they go over. I'm not going to complain about noise tonight. There's been other comments about the pros and cons of the airport. I want to talk about who really benefits from the airport. Now, I'm all for medevac and emergency services, but it doesn't have to be here. It's here. We're providing fuel. They don't need to land here if it's a helicopter. In fact, they probably don't land here if it's a helicopter unless they need fuel. But I spoke to the airport manager right before the meeting, and I asked him the question, how many residents of Qualicum Beach or Parksville own an aircraft that's kept at our airport? He didn't know. He said, that's not something I keep track of. Okay. He said, then he said it might be 25, it might be as high as 40. Okay, so we have 25 or 40. Then there's Iskwoo, providing that service to the south terminal at YVR. When we moved here 17 years ago, my wife was still working, and she had a fair amount of travel in her job. She used KD Air as many as 4 or 5 times a month. She used KD Air. Not in the winter, because you can't rely on Qualicum Beach Airport in the winter, but she used KD Air. Now, what she tells me is when she was flying, it was quite often she was the only passenger on the plane. There was a local lawyer, apparently, who was on the flight now and again. I don't know who that was. But this, I wish them very well. I hope their business succeeds. But this is not a high-density population that's using that service. It's regular people who have to go to Vancouver for business. In my estimate, and I looked at some of the fees for landing, and they're $11. And if you take the total fees reported in the financial statements, they didn't do all of them. The skydiver guys pay fees too. So it's looking to me, just on calculations of my wife's experience, that the low end of regular passengers on Iskwoo is probably around 45. The high end is probably around 60. And that's regular passengers who probably go twice a month to Vancouver. So who's benefiting from this? That's about 65, 75 people. In a population of almost 10,000 now, that's less than 1% of the population. And the airport is costing the other 99.X% hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, millions of dollars, and you don't even include in your presentation the capital projects that weren't covered by grants. And it's all available. There's a good website you should all look at. It's called Qualicum Beach Insights. And everybody behind me should look at that. There's some fabulous articles, not just about the airport, but other stuff. But there's some detailed analysis of the finances of the airport. To say it bluntly, the airport's a financial disaster. And it's doing that for less than 1% of the population. Think about that.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. Ms. Varela.
Your Worship, I would just caution against statements like financial disaster when it comes to municipal operations. The accounting has been made available and it was presented again on the slide tonight. So I would just caution about reputational damage such as that. Thank you.
And thank you for the reminder. I think Mr. Hare made a presentation about what it costs each resident, and it wasn't the same number that I saw in the article from Insight. Next is Dillis Williams.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to talk. I live in Qualicum Woods, and we bought our house 17 years ago. And we weren't on the flight path then, but we are now. So today, I'm not going to complain about noise. I'm going to instead offer some solutions and recommendations that I hope you can take to heart. We've heard repeatedly that the bulk of the noise really is coming from repeated circuits, repeated touch and goes. We see them all the time. We see them so much we can identify the planes. Now, 46 years ago, as you heard in 1978, these were banned on Saturday, Sunday, and holidays. And that's what should happen again now, because the traffic has exponentially increased since then. What I would like to see council do is to put an order in motion in order to put that out, that no flights can happen that are circuit training on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And I believe that that could be put in the Canadian Flight Supplement, because that's the Bible for the pilots. They have to follow it, and it's enforceable. Because we know if you did that, a lot of the noise complaints would go away. A lot of the noise would go away. That's the bulk of the problem. And secondly, we know from looking on the internet that many, many airports in Canada are charging for these touch-and-go circuits. Now, for those who don't know what a touch-and-go circuit is, and I'm not talking to anybody in Qualicum Woods because they do know what that is, they're going around at least 10 times an hour, every 6 minutes. And some days, there are more than one plane teaching, and they do repetitive lessons back to back. And of course, why wouldn't they? Because that's a good business model if you're running a flight school. You're not going to come down here and do one lesson and then go back up to Campbell River. So why are we not charging for touch-and-go fees? Other airports are, and notably, Billy Bishop in Toronto, they're charging $30 a touch-and-go. We should think about that, given the financial, and I won't say disaster, although I am thinking it, of the airport. It's hard to believe that an airport can run on 17 cents a day, because when I looked at the website, Qualicum Beach Insights, it says a detailed forensic analysis shows that this airport costs $5 million to run, including everything. And it's burning and bleeding taxpayer money to the tune of $1,400 a day. Now, if you start charging for touch and go, you could alleviate some of that revenue loss. Now, I was here in July and I brought up the fact that there's a computerized system called Vector. Billy Bishop in Toronto uses it. It clocks every single touch and go, bills the person flying the plane, and collects the money. No involvement of staff whatsoever. You should be thinking about that. Think about instituting that. But in the meanwhile, you should be instituting a touch-and-go fee, because these are users of the airport, and users should be paying, not the taxpayer of Qualicum Beach. When we go to the pool, we have to pay to use the pool, and I certainly don't get a golf game free at Memorial. So why should people who use the airport, which is town-owned, why should they be exempt from paying? It could contribute a lot to the bottom line. And that was the reason that when I talked to Billy Bishop Airport, they said that was the reason that they instituted it, was for revenue purposes. So now I guess the third and final point that I wanted to make, and I have been dealing with Transport Canada on this issue, because it was due to a reason that I put to Kevin about ISKU flying over our house repeatedly. And I was told from Kevin that they can do it. Oh yeah, they can do it, because they're flying instrument flight rules. Whereas you've been seeing on that slide, if you fly visual flight rules, you have to adhere to the noise abatement. But if you're flying instrument flight rules, you don't. So that was very puzzling to me, so I talked to Transport Canada about that. And they came back and they said, well, that's because it's not in your Canadian Flight Supplement. Why don't you put it in your Canadian Flight Supplement? That any plane up there flying instrument flight rules or visual flight rules should adhere to noise abatement. Now that would take away a lot of the noise. It would also take away a lot of the noise from the skydivers flying over us. And it would take away a lot of the noise from Sealand pilot instructors who spend the day teaching here and then fly back to their nice quiet houses in Campbell River. It would take away that. Now those three suggestions, I think, are valid and could be very well considered by council. And not one of those suggestions requires a bylaw. I really think it's time that council stop really, truly abdicating responsibility for this and address it. And I would like to see the town staff stop throwing up stalling tactics.
Your worship.
Sorry, I think that's enough. I think we are working on this. Staff is helping with us.
Okay.
I've said several times that we have scoping sheets that we deal with at the airport, the council that wants to act on. So that is happening, and I don't think we need to go any further with that.
Okay, fine. So I really hope that you would take what I'm saying into consideration, because I think the majority of it would alleviate a lot of the noise mitigation and the noise complaints. And I just had one question, what Kevin put up regarding the ACAP application for a grant. The $3.5 million was for a runway and apron. And the question that I have, did the grant application include an extension of the runway?
It does not. Thank you.
It did not?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Terence Dobin.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Terence Tobin. I live in the Qualicum Woods area, in the Evergreens area. I just wanted to make a couple of quick observations on aircraft noise, and I do apologize if I'm being repetitive here. A lot of people have said a lot of things tonight, and so some of this may be repetitive, but I'll try and stick to my script so I can get through this really quickly, because we're going very long here. So first, thanks to Mayor, Council, and the airport manager, Kevin Goldfuss. I appreciate that you're listening to residents' concerns regarding the airport and have taken some steps to address those concerns, such as the Good Neighbor program. Mr. Goldfuss has also been responsive to complaints made through the town's public inquiry form. In fact, I had a good telephone chat with Mr. Goldfuss back in August, during which he clarified a few things about the airport operations. One was the noise abatement procedure. So my understanding is it's a Transport Canada regulation, therefore it's enforceable, so that's good. It applies to, as we've seen before, it applies to visual flight rules, and it specifies a flight path that flies the extended runway centerline, which of course is right over Qualicum Woods. It bisects Qualicum Woods. And doesn't allow any turns to the north. So all of that is great. Unfortunately, there's a lot of issues with this. One is it does go right over Qualicum Woods. The second is it doesn't reduce the impacts of aircraft noise because it's sending the aircraft right over the middle of Qualicum Woods. With all the increase in commercial training and pleasure flights this past year or two, that means a lot of aircraft are going over there. Some pilots are also turning north once in a while, and we've seen that, and I've reported that a few times. When they do that, they go directly over my house. I've also seen some aircraft fly in over our house as they come in for a landing, so they're not following the flight path coming in either. So that's happened a few times. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it still does happen a few times. And I have reported those incidents at those times. The Good Neighbor program is the second thing. So Mr. Goldfuss has explained that this is an airport authority program. It encourages pilots on takeoff to turn south at the railway tracks when safe to do so. It's published at the airport in signage, as we've seen in the presentation today, but it really only exposes the pilots, the local pilots or pilots that stop here, to that information. And he, Mr. Goldfuss, he shared with me that the program is having some success, as he said tonight. Some pilots are now following the recommended flight path by veering south after takeoff. And I can say myself that that is true, as I've been on walks, around Fern Road and around that area, and I've actually seen pilots that are curving off and going along the railway tracks. So that's great stuff. Unfortunately, the program ultimately, the impact of that program has not been successful, even though some pilots are following it, so that's great. But during the summer months especially, many aircraft are not turning south. They're coming directly either over our neighborhood or adjacent to our neighborhood. So for example, it's common to see aircraft that are flying directly along the path of Village Way. That's really common, along Village Way or the line of trees that are right along Village Way. So that's right adjacent to our neighborhood and all of Qualicum Woods. A few, as I said, are still veering north, flying right over our house. So overall, my impression is that the level and frequency of aircraft noise during the summer has actually not decreased at all over the previous years. It's actually increased. And of course, the biggest weakness of the Good Neighbor program is that it is not enforceable. Its success depends entirely on pilots being informed of the program and having the goodwill to care enough about the local community to choose to follow it. And given how many aircraft don't follow the recommended flight path, it seems many pilots are either not aware of the program or simply ignore it. So the third issue I was going to talk about is instrument flight rules. So we've heard a lot about instrument flight rules, and the bottom line is basically if a pilot follows instrument flight rules, it does not have to follow the noise abatement procedure. So that means that, yes, Isku Air is flying, over our neighborhood all the time, and it's very noisy. They're a twin-engine aircraft, so it's quite noisy. It seems quite confusing. There was actually another issue where I actually reported a plane coming in so low over our house one day that it shook our house. So I reported that, and the airport manager got back to me and said that it was actually, he determined that it was a flight from Calgary and that they were using instrument flight rules. So this is confusing to me, and he actually said that he would talk to them and inform them of the Good Neighbor policy and request that they choose a different flight path. So this is confusing to me. In one case, it seems a pilot may choose whether they use instrument flight rules. In another case, with ISCU, they have to follow a specific flight path for instrument flying set by Transport Canada or NAVCAN. So with all of that in mind, with those kind of three stages in my mind I've just went through, my questions to Mayor, Council, and Airport Manager are these, and again, this might be repeating what some others have said. The first is, can Transport Canada noise abatement procedure be revised so that it specifies the same flight path as the Good Neighbor program? This would effectively help reduce all the noise that we've been talking about, where all the planes are coming over our densely populated neighborhood. The second is, can Transport Canada instrument flight rules path or NAVCAN, I should say, for ISCU Air be revised such that it also complies with the noise abatement procedure, or better yet, the Good Neighbor program flight path? Why not? I mean, as long as it's safe, as long as they're following a route that the Vancouver Airport can track them, why don't they just try and avoid the highly dense neighborhoods? For other pilots, why does using instrument flight rules automatically negate the requirement to follow this airport's noise abatement procedure? Why should they'd be able to get around that just because they've said they've used instrument flying rules? Is it not possible to have instrument flight paths that are still safe yet comply with that procedure? And finally, in the short term, is there anything more that can be done to strongly encourage or require pilots to strictly adhere to the Good Neighbor program? If it's safe to fly that way, if the weather's okay and they can see, why aren't they all veering off to the south? Why do they need to come over all these densely populated neighborhoods? It just simply doesn't make sense to me. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Tobin. I have a request for a bio break, a recess. So if I could ask council for a 5-minute recess. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Vandervog, all in favor? Opposed to be? We're going to have a little recess. Thank you. If I could ask people to take their seat, please, we'll continue on with our meeting. All right, next is Gina Adams.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gina Adams, and I am not from a heavily populated area. I am from the Outback, AKA Hilliers. Oh, wait, that was the other way around. Sorry. Anyhow, why I'm here this evening is because my situation isn't that I don't like airplanes' noise or that I don't like airplanes. The situation is I don't like airplanes flying repetitively over my farm and dead sticking. And the reason is because I have a son, and I'd like you all to imagine, please listen to me for a sec, what it feels like to be blind, in a wheelchair, having seizures, and full of fear. And you have a compromised immune, and you can't go anywhere because COVID and because of chemotherapy. I'd like you to imagine what it feels like to have a lovely farm and a little place to play and little hobbies and go outside and do physiotherapy. And this is your world. You're happy and you're safe. Now, he's lived with me. He's my adopted son for many, many years and has been very content. As you can tell, I'm very emotional about this because I love him dearly. And he's had a heck of a fight to be here today, alive and well. Anyhow, the flights that come dead sticking repeatedly over the farm, and particularly on November the 2nd, I had 12 to 14 flights, low sticking, flying over my farm and scaring him. He had one seizure, and that wasn't so bad, but bad enough. I started to take him in, and the plane ran around and came again, and this time he had a grand mal seizure. And grand mal seizures have different levels. His particular fear-induced grand mal seizure is like someone's punched you in the stomach really hard, you convulse, you hunch, your eyes roll back, and then you regurgitate, and if you're not lucky, you aspirate your vomit and potentially die. So this is not just, I'm not having peace, I'm not enjoying this. This is life or death. And I have expressed this in numerous communications and notifications on the airport noise complaint. And I have had, as of recent, wonderful and compassionate results. And I thank everyone that has been so kindly as to consider and act upon in gracious kindness for my son and myself, and numerous other neighbors as well. I'm not the only one, but not the others didn't have as much passion about what was happening as I do, because this is my son, and this is a little boy, and this is his life. I am worried, however, that with time, things will get muddled up and people will forget, and the next thing you know, we'll have flight schools or airplane noise traffic again over the farm. I'm hoping, because we're not heavily populated, but we do have people out there and we do live in the country, and we didn't anticipate a flight training school or a flight training air path in our area, that it will be restricted in the near future permanently. Because again, this is not just something I dislike or my son dislikes. It is truly life or death. And it could be potentially life or death. So I thank you all for listening. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Ms. Adams. David Creswell. Some may have left already, I'm not sure, but we'll wait, we'll go on to the next one. That's Peter Sterry.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council, citizens. I live in Chartwell. I'm here to talk about something very different from what the conversation's been about up till now. And I don't want to minimize the importance of those submissions by any means, but this is an entirely separate issue. I do also want to address, as one of the previous speakers pointed out, the invitation to this meeting and the statement that in fact, we're all working together, council and citizens working together to ensure that the airport provides benefit to the entire community. The aspect that I want to address is the paths in the pedestrian paths, walking paths in the vicinity of the airport, and the informal path that exists around the perimeter of the airport, and the impact of the airport on existing paths that are slightly removed from the airport but connect to the paths, the formal and informal paths in the neighborhood in that general area. These paths are passable generally only in the summertime, and the primary reason for that is drainage from the airport. It overwhelms existing culverts, and the capacity of existing culverts floods areas that people walk. And with regard to the somewhat informal path around the airport, make it essentially make it unusable, and so significantly restrict its usefulness to the community. I think that neighborhood paths are a very important amenity for the health of the community. It brings people together. It connects parts of the community. It facilitates exercise. I think and I'm appreciative that Qualicum Beach has quite a few of these. Providing alternatives for us to travel and get around our community without starting up a car. So I think in the interest of providing value to the entire community, I'd like to ask council and staff to review this issue. I know some work has been done in the last year or two around the airport to improve drainage. There have been some half-hearted efforts to deal with some of the issues of flooding in the perimeter, along the perimeter path. They're very half-hearted. In one case, there's a mud hole that was half filled, and then the other half remained unfilled. So, and I'm not sure what the reason for that was. Perhaps ran out of material. In another more recent case, the worst corner, the northeast corner of the airport, where water from the airport drained across the adjacent lands and essentially created a large pool that was impassable for half of the year, was actually raised, but unfortunately not enough care was given to the design of the improvement, and what's happened is that the flooding has simply moved along a few meters, and so the next section of path is now flooded and impassable. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to bring it up as an issue. I think that these community paths are highly valuable, and I've noticed that the ones around the airport have been deteriorating due largely to insufficient maintenance, and brush clearing is another issue, but in addition to the drainage that's been handled a little bit haphazardly and probably not comprehensively enough, with the result that some invasive species have now taken root on the airport side of the fence. So that's another issue that I suppose will have to be dealt with by the town at some time. So again, I would encourage greater attention to that particular aspect, and and in particular drainage and invasive plants that inhibit the public's use of that amenity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is, let's see, Kevin. Kevin from Isku Air. That must be you, Kevin.
Not sure how this works. Mayor, Council, thanks for having us and having this meeting for everybody to hear and hear some of the challenges that people have. I'm not here to complain or anything like that. I just wanted to bring some facts a little bit, maybe to enlighten some people that may think that our airport may not be a valuable asset. Well, Esqueo Air has been operating now since June of 2022, I guess it's been. In that time, we have transported over 15,000 passengers in and out of Qualicum Beach Airport. And I can guarantee you, on all those passengers, probably, because I fly most of the flights, I bet you 80% are residents of this area, if not more. Or people that are coming to see their grandparents, their families that live in this community. So our airport does really serve the people in this area, in my opinion. There's been talk about the IFR, VFR. I'd like to just clarify one thing. Mr. Goldfuss tried to explain it, but not Transport Canada, NAV Canada, and YVR. Our flights take us to YVR. With that, YVR, with staffing reductions since COVID, have really limited the amount of air traffic that goes into YVR, and they manage it. So what they do to us is they make us fly instrument procedures into YVR. It's coming. They've been doing it in Toronto International for 30 years or whatever. It's always been instrument only. That's how they eliminate the little airplanes going into YVR. They make them fly instrument. So here I am on a most beautiful day. I have to fly IFR procedures that take us straight out of runway 11 or straight out on runway 29. Probably our pilots, 80% of the time we use runway 11, which takes us eastbound because it's closer and it takes us less time. Now, and that's typically in the winter months. So we have to do it, we have no choice. Now, changing the IFR procedure, that's not an easy process because of the terrain that we have. If we were to use the noise abatement procedure on an instrument, we would be going in cloud directly to the mountains. We have a mess up and things would not go well. So that's why that goes straight out over the water, lower terrain, nothing to hit in the event that something happens. So I don't see those procedures changing easily. So we have to live with that if we want to fly to YVR. That is just the way it is. So there was a little comment about the AIM. I just wanted to, there's this Aeronautic Information Manual. I caution when using that document, it's actually not regulation. It's kind of the Coles Notes of the regulation. So that's, when you go to the Aeronautics Act, that is. So that's just something to put in your bucket there. And of course, like I said, the one last thing, I've been flying in Qualicum since 1988, in and out of here. So my first flight was back in 1988, long time. We have been basically doing the noise abatement good program since 1988. We've changed it a little bit, but basically the intent has still been the same way. So I understand that maybe some people think that it's changed, but the way I've been flying the procedure when it's VFR, I've been doing since 1988. So I'm not sure how one can say that it's really changed. Yeah, it was published in the CFS years ago, but they had to take that out from what I understand. But basically we've been flying straight off, turning to the left 45 degrees or to the right, to the south since then. So I'm not quite sure what else to say about that. I know from watching the pilots at the Qualicum Airport, because I'm there every day flying our flights, I would say 75 to 80, maybe 95%, I don't know the number, but most of them follow the Good Neighbor program and the noise abatement program. Now, we do have pilots that come from other airports that don't know the procedures or they elect not to use the procedures. We can't control that, but I can guarantee you, if I see them, I tell them. And that's part of education. And that's us trying to be good neighbors. So, last thing, it's Esquello. It does mean woman in Cree, but that's the pronunciation. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Kevin, and I know some people wonder why when somebody says Qualicum, I correct them and say it's Qualicum Beach. I mean, you don't say in the legislature you live in Columbia, you live in British Columbia. So I kind of take that kind of a path, but I want to be respectful that some people may not realize it, but Qualicum is actually the name of the school district. So
That's
we are
right.
all in Qualicum. But when you're in this council chamber, you're definitely in Qualicum Beach. So we're just trying to be, you're correcting me about the other things. So I thought, Kevin, let's call us fade. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. No disrespect.
Okay. Next, we have Nancy Marshall.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm, I guess, the manager of Sealand Flight and the horrendous flying school. The reason we're in Qualicum is we were invited here. And the reason we're invited here is because we were established to work within our community to try and get kids into aviation, to teach the kids in our communities how to fly so they didn't have to go to Vancouver, Abbotsford, all over Canada, actually. We got started because we've got an aviation business in Campbell River and we fix aircraft, and we were having trouble finding people to stay in town to work on aircraft. That was back in the day when everybody went off to Fort McMurray and made oodles of money and never came home. And we discovered this program called Teen Flight, which got teenagers from schools building planes. So we did that. But then Kevin actually had the flying school in town, and he was down here and he was working with Orca Air and various other places. And so we got in touch with Kevin and said, can we get the flying school reestablished in Campbell River so the kids have a place to learn to fly? And we did that. Ian, who'd been working with Kevin, came to work for us, and the flying school continues. The Qualicum Beach Flying Club got in touch with us and asked us if we could move that program, at least teaching the kids how to fly, down to Campbell River. We were also asked to go to Powell River. And right now we operate out of Powell River, Courtney Air Park, Qualicum Beach. We've got a classroom up in Port Hardy, but we never get up there. We were in Dawson Creek for a couple of years. And where have I forgotten? Courtney Air Park? Got that one. Anyway, it's basically have school, we'll travel. If you've got kids and you want to get them trained and there's enough of them, we'll go, we'll figure it out. And we've never really made money. We've actually kind of lost money over the years. I was retired, I came back in. I don't get paid actually, but just because it's so much fun to teach kids how to fly and to work in the aviation community. So a few years ago, I decided I really wanted to get an electric plane. I made the mistake of buying an electric car and loved it so much that, and looked at our planes and said, these are crazy. We need to get electric planes because they're so much better. And at that point I did some research, looking at things, discovered the horrors of leaded gas. Avgas still has lead in it. There are issues. It does affect children, the lead in the avgas. It will go home on mechanics' clothes and can fall off on the floor. The lead in the avgas is very, very, very fine, so that it will go through an engine. It's got an additive that makes it smaller. It's only produced in what's got to be a horrible place in Manchester, England. The industry has known about this for many, many years, and the Environmental Protection Agency in the States finally has been forcing the FAA to do something. Cessna has already approved all of our aircraft for burning alternate fuel, and the problem is there's no alternate fuel available. The major effect of lead on communities, and it affects older people too, is I guess it's exacerbated if there's a lot of aircraft. So in Southern California, the airports where there's huge numbers of small aircraft burning avgas, the effects are noticeable, and the effects are noticeable downwind of the airports and closer to the airports in the United States. The population is usually lower income, so it's affecting visible minorities more than you know, the upper middle class down there. In Qualicum, I think that the worry about the farms and the children is something we should be aware of, but I think it's just a worry. I don't think we've got the population of aircraft to make a huge effect on our environment. I'd love to see it studied. I'd love to see it studied actually in Courtenay, where we've got airplanes and apartment blocks and condominiums all cheek by jowl. One of the things that the electric aircraft does, of course, is get away from that. If we can get the new types of avgas into Canada, it's apparently available, possibly available in Southern California. That would be great, but it's a few years down the road. And like I said, I think that we don't have the population of aircraft in our environment that is going to make a huge difference to us. But it is out there, and it's something we should recognize. The electric aircraft, as anybody who came to the demonstration of a couple of months ago knows, is a lot quieter than the traditional aircraft. And I'd like to have two of them working down here rather than the usual Cessna 172s. The other comment I have is that the airport manager has done a really, really, really good job of channeling the complaints about noise to his office. We don't hear the complaints, and we would welcome anybody to call us at any time. We have trackers on our planes, we know where they are, and anytime we have had a complaint, it appears probably 99% of the time it isn't our plane. It's somebody who's come through, doesn't know the good neighbor policy yet, and it doesn't appear to be us that's generating the noise complaints. At least for touch and goes, yeah, it probably is us. And the other pilots who are practicing as well, because you have to keep practicing to maintain your ability. We'd like to do anything we can to make the situation better. And if there is a complaint, we'd like to hear about it. We'd like people to be directed to perhaps text us, or phoning can be a little bit much. And we have had phoned in complaints in Campbell River, and we do talk to our pilots and say, hey, can you avoid that house on Ham Road? We're driving her nuts. And it all works out, and it's nice to be able to talk to people and explain that, what we're doing, who we are, and find out how we can help. So that's basically it, I guess, is three-phase power. We need three-phase power for charging the electric aircraft. There's economic opportunities in bringing three-phase power in, because we've been working with hydro to try and make this happen. There was somebody who suggested there's a growing network that's of people in aviation. We seem to be the cutting edge in Canada on bringing in electric aircraft into training. But there's a growing network of people who are working on electrification of airports. And suggestion yesterday was that you've got all this area, you can put in solar panels, you can be totally independent of the grid if the grid happens to collapse, which on the island, of course, is always a possibility. There's all sorts of possibilities, economic possibilities going forward. So we're just keeping going, and anybody's got any complaints, please tell us and we'll do what we can. Thank you.
Well, thank you for what you're doing regarding electric planes. And on the way out, you will be asked by a number of people what your contact number is. Okay, yeah, so I won't ask you to repeat that, but if anybody wants your contact, they can ask you on the way out. Thank you. That concludes the names on the list. Is there anyone else that didn't get the name on the list that would like to speak? And I know this lady up here would, so go ahead, ma'am. And then the gentleman in the back.
My name is Christine Purdy, and I live in Qualicum Woods. Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for allowing me to speak. And I'm going to speak on the right of quiet enjoyment on one's property. In BC, we have the Tenants Act. Landlords have to ensure a tenant is undisturbed where possible. Residents of Qualicum Beach, who are property owners, pay taxes to the town, so we are similar to tenants, and the town is sort of our landlords. If renting tenants enjoy the right to peace and the landlord has to do what they can to protect that, shouldn't property owners in this town have a similar right to enjoyment? The town, as the manager of the airport, should be protecting our rights to quiet enjoyment. I appreciate the town giving us this forum to speak, but we have been communicating privately and through the Qualicum Woods Residents Association for over 7 years about the airport noise. The noise level continues to get worse with no lasting improvements. We get a report from the town of the number of complaints about the airport issues. Does the town record the number of touch and goes with flight training? Does the town plan to charge for touch and goes? This would raise money to offset the large deficit of the airport each year. This may also reduce the number of planes coming from all areas to use our free airport. It's the Wild West out there. Thank you, Mayor and councillors and town, for allowing me to speak, for the hard work involved in trying to find a solution. Thank you, Todd and directors, for all the time you put in to try to improve our quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman in the back, come on up.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Brian Anderson. I live, if you can guess, in Qualicum Woods. We bought our house in 2017, and when we did buy our house, we did spend the time to do the due diligence because we know there's an airport close by. And during that time, we didn't experience the frequency of flights that we have today. And after 5 years of living at our home, we still didn't experience it. And to illustrate what it feels like for us, think of a car without a muffler. They're very loud. Now park that car in front of your house. And every 2 to 3 minutes, for 10 to 15 seconds, that car is revving its engine. At times, it's unbearable. And for us, it's not the helicopter training, the occasional helicopter training, it's not the medical, and it's not the passenger flights. And I'm sorry to say, it is the touch and go that is happening on a regular basis. And when I came here today, I came to ask for you to put a stop to the circuit training over Qualicum Woods. But after hearing both sides and understanding the benefits, I'm asking you to limit the amount of touch and go and circuit training over Qualicum Woods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Yes, come on up, ma'am.
Good evening. I've been a resident of Qualicum Beach on and off, born here. Mother was born here. Grandparents came here in 1910, came to Qualicum Beach. So I'm here before the flight school. I'm here before the commercial flights. I'm here before it was paved. There was a big to-do about putting lights at the airport. There was a small to-do about the Rotary giving you the airport for $1. I am on Qualicum Road. I have a farm. Across the street is an organic farm. We are very concerned about lead pollution. One of the things that you may be tempted to do is to move the colored areas on the map. There's less of us to the south, but we are just as impacted by the noise and by the lead. And I'm sure you don't want to go to the market and find your organic produce with a little asterisk, may contain lead poisoning. I just don't want you to look at an easy solution and say, well, let's just move it over a little bit. Hilliers is impacted, Rupert Road is impacted, we're all impacted, and we would like some kind of a creative solution that doesn't just shift the problem to where there's less of us. Thank you very much for your time, and good luck, because this is not a real easy one for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet? Well, thank you for your participation, and thank you for being respectful to all of us here. And I see you are allowed to speak for the second time, so I'll let Carol first.
Just a quick, I forgot to say this. When we had guests visiting us this summer on our patio, 2 of those sets of people were very interested in buying homes and being our neighbors. And as we sat there and these flights were going over and over and over, they said, Carol, Fred, we couldn't handle this. I just want you to know we lost 2 good couples that would have bought in our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the gallery wishing to speak? So with that, I think, Council, that was basically what we hope to do, is to hear from the public. We took copious notes, and hopefully we can address some of them at the December Council meeting when some of these coping sheets will come to play. And hope we can do something. As someone said, it's not an easy thing. If you want to keep the airport and you have to have a scheduled flight to apply for the grants from the federal government, you have to have a scheduled flight. So the area of concern, or from what we hear the most about, is the flight patterns, and it could be this flight school, it could be another flight school, but having these repeated flight overpasses over homes. I've gone to the area where people complained, and I'm sure other members of council have too, and sat in their yard or stood in front of their home to hear what they were hearing. And yes, it can be stressful. So we need to do something to work with the pilots, this flight school, whoever it is, to deal with that concern, because I believe we can do better. So with that, thank you very much. And council, if you're ready to adjourn, we can. Councilor Skipsey, that didn't take long. Councilor Venable seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.